Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku used advanced nanotech to surpass all heroes. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The sun was bleeding out across the beautiful skyline, painting the undersides of the clouds in garish shades of orange and violet. To anyone else, it might have been beautiful. To Izuku Midoriya, it was just a slow, mocking fade to black, a perfect mirror for the dream that had just been executed on a lonely rooftop. His feet moved on autopilot, scuffing against the cracked pavement, one foot in front of the other. That was all he could manage. The city's symphony, the distant wail of sirens, the rumble of the maglev train, the cacophony of 1,000 conversations, was a muted drone, a meaningless buzz outside the roaring silence in his head. It's not bad to dream, kid. But you need to be realistic, All Might's voice. It wasn't cruel. That was the worst part. It was kind, gentle, and full of a weary pity that felt 1,000 times sharper than any insult Kaken had ever thrown at him. It was the voice of a man who had seen the world for what it was, a world carved into two distinct castes, the ones who could, and the ones who couldn't. Izuku had just had his official classification stamped onto his soul. He clutched the strap of his yellow backpack so tightly his knuckles were white mountains on a pale, trembling landscape. Inside, his notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future number 13, felt like a block of lead. The pages, filled with frantic scribbles, detailed drawings, and hopeful theories, were now just a testament to his own monumental foolishness. A monument to a dead dream. He remembered watching the video for the first time, a tiny boy perched on his chair, his eyes wide with wonder. All Might, emerging from the wreckage of a disaster, a dozen people cradled in his powerful arms, his smile a sunbeam that cut through the smoke and fear. It's fine now. He had boomed, his voice a promise. Why? Because I am here. That little boy had decided his life's course in that single, glorious moment. He would be a hero. He would save people with a smile. He would be just like All Might. The world, however, had other plans. The doctor's office. The X-ray of his foot with its extra toe joint. The clinical, emotionless words that had been the first nail in his coffin. Quirkless. He'd spent the next 10 years trying to pry that nail out with sheer willpower. He studied. He analyzed. He trained his body until his muscles screamed. He filled notebook after notebook, believing, with the desperate faith of the truly powerless, that knowledge could be his weapon, that his mind could be his quirk. All Might had taken that desperate faith and crushed it under the heel of his practical, heroic boot. Pro-heroes are always risking their lives. I cannot simply say, you can become a hero even without a power. He had even signed the notebook. The ink felt like an epitaph. Here lies the dream of Izuku Midoriya. When he finally reached the familiar door of his apartment, he felt a century old. His key fumbled in the lock, his hand shaking too much to find the keyhole. He took a deep, shuddering breath and tried again, the click of the lock sounding like a gunshot in the quiet hallway. He slipped inside, closing the door softly behind him. I'm home, he mumbled, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Inko Midoriya was in the kitchen, the warm, savory smell of katsudon filling the small apartment. She turned, her smile warm and welcoming, but it faltered the second she saw his face. A mother's intuition is a quirk all its own, more potent and perceptive than any sensory enhancement. She saw the hollowed-out look in his eyes, the unnatural stillness of his shoulders, the utter absence of the frantic, hopeful light that was the very essence of her son. Izuku? Honey, what's wrong? She asked, wiping her hands on her apron and rushing to his side. Her small hand came up to cup his cheek, her thumb stroking away a tear he didn't even know had fallen. He tried to smile. It was a pathetic, broken thing that didn't reach his eyes. Nothing, Mom. I'm fine. Just a long day. The lie was so thin it was transparent. The dam of his composure, already cracked and strained, shattered under the weight of her gentle concern. A choked sob escaped his lips. His face crumpled, and the grief he'd been holding in since that rooftop came pouring out in a torrent of silent, body-racking tears. Inko didn't press him for details. She just wrapped her arms around him, pulling his head down to her shoulder as he wept. She held him tightly, her own eyes shimmering with unshed tears, her heart aching with a fierce, protective love. She had seen this coming, not the specifics, but she had watched the world chip away at her bright, beautiful boy for 10 long years. She had seen the light in his eyes dim with every jeer, every sympathetic head tilt, every reminder of what he lacked. Tonight, it looked like the light had finally gone out. And she couldn't let that happen. After his sobs subsided into ragged breaths, she guided him to the living room couch. She sat beside him, holding his hand, waiting for him to speak. He told her everything. The sludge villain. Kakin. All Might. The rooftop. The words spilled out, disjointed and raw. He finished by staring at his own empty hands, resting limply in his lap. He said I should be realistic. Maybe a police officer. The words were spoken with a terrifying lack of emotion. It was the sound of defeat. Of final, absolute surrender. Inko's heart broke all over again. She squeezed his hand, a new resolve hardening her soft features. For years she had held onto a secret, a promise she'd made to a man who was more of a ghost than a husband. Hisashi had made her swear she would only reveal his legacy if Izuku ever reached this point, the absolute nadir of his hope. She had prayed the day would never come, but it was here. The platitudes were gone. The apologies were worthless. Hope had to come from somewhere else. Izuku, she said, her voice quiet but firm, pulling him from his daze. There's something I need to show you. Something your father left for you. Izuku looked up, confusion warring with his despair. His father was a specter in his life, a man who worked abroad, sending money and the occasional postcard. He was a nonentity, a blank space in their family portrait. Dad, come with me, Inko said, standing up and leading him towards the small hallway closet that housed the pull-down ladder to their attic. The attic was a dusty, forgotten space, filled with old photo albums, seasonal decorations, and the ghosts of years past. The air was thick and still. Inko navigated through the stacks of boxes to a far corner, to an old wooden trunk covered in a faded floral blanket. She knelt and opened it. Inside, nestled amongst his old baby clothes and a well-loved All Might onesie, was a briefcase. It was completely out of place. While everything else in the attic was a product of a normal, domestic life, the briefcase was something else entirely. It wasn't leather or plastic. It was made of a matte black, non-reflective material that seemed to absorb the light from the single bare bulb overhead. It had no visible handle, only a faint silver seam running around its middle and a small, dark glass panel on its top. It looked like a prop from a spy movie, a piece of alien technology hidden in their mundane world. Hisashi told me to give this to you, Inko said, her voice trembling slightly as she lifted the heavy case. He said to give it to you when you were old enough to understand, or if you ever truly lost your way. She placed it on the floor in front of Izuku. I think that time is now. Izuku stared at it, his mind struggling to process this sudden, bizarre turn. What is it? What did Dad do? Inko took a deep breath. The lie she had maintained for over a decade was about to end. Your father, Izuku, he didn't work in corporate finance. Not really. He was a scientist, a biotechnician and a cyberneticist. One of the most brilliant, and most controversial, in his field. He didn't believe in waiting for evolution. He believed in forcing its hand. She gently pressed Izuku's thumb to the dark glass panel. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a thin line of green light scanned his print. There was a soft, satisfying hiss as a vacuum seal broke, and the case opened with whisper-quiet hydraulics. The interior was stark white, padded with a strange, self-healing foam. There were only 2 items nestled within. One was a data pad, as sleek and black as the case itself. The other was an object that looked like a futuristic syringe, though it was far more complex. It was a chroman white auto-injector, about the size of a thick marker pen. Intricate, hair-thin lines of what looked like green circuitry pulsed with a soft, internal light along its side, and its needle was retracted within a complex-looking tip. Izuku reached out a hesitant hand and picked up the data pad. It hummed to life the moment his fingers touched it, the screen glowing with a soft green light. There was a single file on the screen, labeled, for Izuku. His hands shaking, he opened it. It was a letter. From his father. My dearest Izuku, if you are reading this, it means one of two things. Either you have come of age and your mother has deemed you ready, or you have reached a point of despair so profound that she has turned to this as a last resort. Knowing your spirit, my son, I suspect it is the latter. I hope I am wrong, but I was never a man to bet against the odds. There is much I have kept from you, for your safety and for your mother's. The world is not as simple as it appears on the nightly news, with its clear lines between heroes and villains. The true battles, the ones that will define the future of humanity, are fought in laboratories and boardrooms, far from the public eye. I saw it early on, Izuku. The advent of quirks. Humanity called it the next step in evolution. The dawn of a new age. I called it a glorious, chaotic mistake. A genetic lottery that bestowed godlike power upon some and left others in the dust, creating an immediate and permanent imbalance that would forever stall our true potential. Evolution is not about random chance. It is about adaptation and perfection. Quirks are a biological dead end, a beautiful but ultimately flawed path. Why rely on the luck of the draw when we have the capacity to create our own evolution? To build our own future? That has been my life's work. Not to fight quirks, but to render them obsolete. To create a system that would allow a single human to analyze, adapt, and overcome any obstacle, be it physical, environmental, or even metahuman. In your hands, you hold the culmination of that work. The autoinjector contains the sole working prototype of Project Deadless. It is not a drug. It is a colony. Trillions of microscopic, biointegrated machines, nanites, programmed with a single directive, to bond with a host and become their ultimate tool for survival and advancement. They will integrate with your cellular structure, your nervous system, your very DNA. They will become a part of you, an extension of your will. They will not give you a quirk, Izuku. They will give you something more. The ability to control matter and energy at a fundamental level, limited only by your own intellect, willpower, and biological energy reserves. You will see the world as I do, not as a collection of objects, but as a system of interlocking data, ready to be analyzed and manipulated. This is a heavy burden. This technology is decades, perhaps centuries, ahead of its time. There are powerful people who would kill to possess it. Once you make this choice, you can never go back. You will be an anomaly, a ghost in a machine of your own making. You will be alone in what you can do. I do not know what path you will choose. I do not know if you still dream of being a hero, a dream I admit I never fully understood. But I know your heart. I know you are kind and brave, and that you possess a drive that no genetic lottery could ever bestow. That is why I left this for you, and you alone. The world told you that you were born without power. I am giving you the chance to build your own. I did not give you a quirk, Izuku. I gave you a choice. I gave you a key. What door you choose to open is up to you. Be careful, my son. With all my love, Hisashi Midoriya. The screen went dark. Izuku sat in the dusty silence of the attic, the data pad feeling impossibly heavy in his lap. His mind was a maelstrom of confusion, awe, and a terrifying, burgeoning flicker of something he hadn't felt in hours. Hope, a system. The ability to analyze, adapt, and overcome. Build your own power. He looked from the data pad to the softly glowing auto-injector. It was insane. It was the stuff of science fiction. It was also, and possibly, right here in front of him. His mother watched him, her expression a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Izuku? He looked at her, then around at the attic, then back at the injector. All Might's voice echoed in his head one last time. You can't become a hero without a power. A bitter, humorless smile touched his lips. What if I don't need a quirk? He thought of Kaken's sneering face. He thought of the pity in the eyes of his teachers. He thought of the decade of loneliness, of being less than human in a superhuman world. He had nothing left to lose. His dream was already dead and buried. What was the harm in trying to perform a little necromancy? With a resolve that felt cold and sharp as steel, he picked up the auto-injector. It felt cool and smooth in his palm, humming with a faint, almost imperceptible vibration. Izuku, wait! Inko breathed, her hand reaching for him. Are you sure? He looked at her, and for the first time since he'd come home, The light was back in his eyes. It wasn't the bright, innocent flame of his childhood. This was different. It was colder, more focused, like the heart of a distant star. "Mom," he said, his voice steady. "My dream, it died today. Maybe this is how I build a new one." He didn't hesitate. He pressed the tip of the auto-injector against his forearm. There was a sharp hiss, like a miniature fire extinguisher, and he felt a painless, sharp pressure. A ring of green light on the device flashed once, then faded. He felt a sudden, intense cold spread from the injection site, racing up his arm and into his chest, a wave of cryogenic fluid flooding his veins. He dropped the now inert device. It clattered on the wooden floor. For a moment, nothing happened. He looked at his arm, at the tiny red dot where the injector had been, and then the pain hit him. It was not a simple pain. It was an all-encompassing, mind-shattering agony that lit up every nerve ending in his body. It felt like he was being simultaneously frozen and set on fire. He collapsed, crying out as his muscles seized. It was the feeling of being unmade, of his entire biological structure being forcibly rewritten. He felt a trillion microscopic probes surging through his bloodstream, mapping his cells, cataloging his DNA, integrating with his nervous system. It was a violation on a cellular level. "Izuku!" Inko shrieked, scrambling towards him. He couldn't answer. His vision was fragmenting, dissolving into a kaleidoscope of static and blinding light. And then, something new appeared. In the corner of his vision, text began to scroll. It was a crisp, clinical green, superimposed over reality itself. Deadlist system initializing. Host biometrics detected. Host, Izuku Midoriya. Beginning cellular integration. 15%. Warning, host neural stress levels exceeding safe parameters. Warning, cortisol and adrenaline levels critical. Integrating with host nervous system. 48%. It was a heads-up display. A HUD. Like in a video game, but this was terrifyingly real. He could feel it, the system sinking its digital tendrils into his brain, his spine, every part of him. The pain was still immense, but now it had a context. It was the pain of installation. A new operating system was being loaded onto his biological hardware. Neural sync achieved. Visual auditory cortex integration complete. 75%. Bioenergy reservoir calibration in progress. Full system integration. 99%. 100%. Daedalus system version 1.0 online. All protocols nominal. Welcome, administrator. Just as suddenly as it began, the searing pain vanished. It was replaced by a low, powerful thrumming deep within his chest, a feeling of coiled energy that was both alien and intimately his own. He lay on the floor, gasping for breath, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. The green text in his vision faded, leaving only a few faint, translucent icons in the periphery, a biosignature monitor, a power level gauge, a small compass. "Izuku! Izuku, are you okay?" Inko sobbed, cradling his head. He pushed himself into a sitting position, his body trembling with the aftershocks. I think so," he rasped. His senses felt sharper. He could hear the frantic beating of his own heart as a clear, distinct rhythm. He could see the individual dust motes dancing in the beam of the light bulb. He felt a strange, tingling awareness of his own body, as if he could feel the blood flowing through his veins. He was different. Fundamentally, irrevocably different. He got to his feet, swaying slightly. He felt weak, drained, but also powerful. It was a dizzying contradiction. He took a wobbly step, trying to process the flood of new information his senses were feeding him, the faint icons of the HUD hovering in his vision. He felt like a newborn foal, trying to understand how its legs worked. Distracted and disoriented, he stumbled against a stack of old boxes. They tipped over, sending their contents spilling across the floor. A dozen of his old hero analysis notebooks, his life's work, tumbled through the air. The most important one, the one he had just gotten signed, Hero Analysis for the Future number 13, fell end over end, heading straight for a puddle of water from a small leak in the roof. "No!" he gasped. Without thinking, without any conscious command, his left hand shot out. It wasn't a desperate grab. It was an instinct, A command issued not by his brain, but by some deeper part of him that was now intertwined with the deadless system. A soft, humming sound filled the air. A cascade of shimmering, emerald-green light erupted from his palm. It solidified in the space of a microsecond, forming a perfectly flat, hexagonal barrier of hard light a foot in front of his hand. The notebook slapped against the barrier with a soft thud. It stopped its descent completely, hovering in midair, protected. Silence descended upon the attic. Inko stared, her hands flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. Izuku slowly lowered his arm. The hard light barrier wavered, dissolved into 1,000 tiny motes of green light, and vanished as if it had never been there. The notebook fell the final few inches, landing safely on a dry patch of floor. He looked down at his hand. His perfectly normal, slightly trembling, quirkless hand. The hand that had just defied the laws of physics. The hand that had just performed a miracle. The world had told him he was powerless. His father had given him the tools to build his own power. He stared at his palm, at the faint lines and calluses, and for the first time in his life, he didn't see the hand of a helpless fanboy. He saw the hand of a creator. The dream wasn't dead. It had just been rebooted. The 10 months that followed the night in the attic were a blur of pain, discovery, and relentless, agonizing reinvention. The world had not changed, but Izuku Midoriya's perception of it had been fractured and reassembled into something entirely new. He no longer saw a world of solid objects. He saw a world of data, of interlocking systems, of matter and energy waiting for a command. The first few days were a special kind of hell. The heads-up display was a constant, overwhelming presence. Walking down the street was a sensory nightmare. His new eyes, augmented by the deadless system, saw everything. A passing car wasn't just a car, it was a schematic of an internal combustion engine, a readout of its velocity, structural integrity, and the heat signature of its occupants. A simple lamp post was annotated with its material composition, 98.6% steel, 1.2% carbon, trace elements, its electrical current, and its potential structural weak points. He had to wear sunglasses indoors just to dampen the flood of information. Sleep offered little respite. His dreams were feverish landscapes of scrolling code, architectural blueprints, and the disquieting sensation of 1 trillion microscopic machines patrolling his bloodstream, repairing micro-tears in his muscles and optimizing his mitochondrial output. It was during one of these sleepless nights, staring at the All Might poster on his ceiling, now a complex analysis of ink composition and paper tensile strength, that he first decided to interact with the system, consciously. How do I talk to you? He thought, feeling foolish. Instantly, a simple text box materialized in the center of his vision, a blinking green cursor awaiting input. Query? He was so startled he nearly fell out of his chair. It was a direct neural interface. He didn't need to speak, he just needed to think with intent. Who are you? He projected. I am the user interface for the deadless system. I am a passive, non-sentient facilitator program designed to assist the administrator in system operations and data processing. Do you have a name? Izuku asked, a flicker of his old, inquisitive nature stirring. Designation, UI assist. A name is not a functional parameter. That felt too cold, too impersonal for the entity that was now inextricably part of him. His father had named the system Deadless, after the brilliant Greek inventor, the master craftsman who created wings to escape his prison. It was a name full of genius and tragedy. Izuku thought of Deadless's son, the one who flew too close to the sun. A warning. A reminder of the dangers of ambition. I'm going to call you Icarus, Izuku decided. There was a pause, a millisecond of processing that felt like an eternity. Designation Icarus logged and accepted. How may I assist you, Administrator? That was the beginning of his true training. The next 10 months became a singular, obsessive pursuit. His mother, seeing the fire back in his eyes, albeit a different, more intense flame, supported him unconditionally, ensuring he was fed and cared for as he waged a quiet war to master the universe inside him. The first 3 months were dedicated to the fundamentals, physical conditioning and mastering the system's passive abilities. He started by cleaning the infamous Dagoba Municipal Beach Park, a local eyesore that had become an illegal dumping ground. But for Izuku, it wasn't just community service. It was the perfect training ground. Every morning before dawn, he would be there. While his old self would have struggled to haul a single refrigerator, his new body was a different beast entirely. Icarus, activate body reinforcement. Stage 1, he would command. Acknowledged. Applying nanite lattice to skeletal and muscular systems. Bioenergy draw, 3%. He would feel a subtle, deep-seated vibration as the nanites swarmed from his bloodstream, clinging to his bones and weaving themselves through his muscle fibers. His skeleton became a reinforced composite, his muscles hypercontractile. A refrigerator that should have weighed hundreds of pounds felt like an oversized suitcase. He could run faster, jump higher, and endure for hours without fatigue as the nanites efficiently processed lactic acid and delivered oxygen. But it was the analysis mode that truly transformed the junkyard into a university. He would touch an old, rusted engine block, and his HUD would explode with information. Object, internal combustion engine block. Composition, cast iron, Fe, 3.5% C, 2.1% C, steel pistons, traces of copper, aluminum. Structural analysis, extensive corrosion. Multiple fracture points. Low tensile strength. Knowledge database updated basic metallurgy, mechanical engineering principles. He was a voracious, walking library. He absorbed the data from every piece of junk he touched. Discarded computers taught him about circuit boards and processing logic. Broken microwaves revealed the secrets of magnetrons, and shattered pieces of concrete and rebar gave him a crash course in civil engineering. He wasn't just cleaning the beach. He was devouring it, converting its physical information into his own personal database. His father's system wasn't just a tool. It was the ultimate learning machine. By the 6th month, the beach was nearly half cleared. Izuku's physique had transformed. He was no longer the scrawny, hunched-over boy. He was lean and wiry, every muscle defined, a product of nanite-enhanced physical training. But the real growth was internal. He had moved on to the system's most profound ability, construct creation. It had started small. He remembered the first time he tried it consciously. He focused on the memory of the hard light shield from the attic, focusing all his will on his palm. Icarus, create a small, solid object. A cube. Specify material parameters. Material? I don't know, the light stuff from before. Hard light is a simplified term. The system manipulates localized energy fields, converting ambient electromagnetic energy into solid photons. This process is extremely bioenergy intensive. Suggestion: utilize on-site raw materials for greater efficiency. It was a revelation. He could use the junk around him. He picked up a handful of iron filings from a rusted-out car door. He held them in his palm and focused. Icarus, use these filings. Restructure them into a solid cube. Acknowledged. Initiating matter manipulation protocol. Bioenergy draw, 0.8%. He felt a warmth spread through his hand. The iron filings lifted into the air, swirling in a miniature cyclone above his palm. They glowed with a faint green light as the nanites enveloped them, breaking them down and restructuring them on a molecular level. In seconds, the swirling dust collapsed in on itself, solidifying into a perfect, seamless iron cube, resting heavy and real in his hand. He stared at it, his breath caught in his throat. This wasn't a quirk. This wasn't magic. This was science. Transmutation on a microscopic scale. From there, his progress was exponential. Cubes became spheres. Spheres became tools. He learned to weave carbon from the air and iron from the soil to create simple crowbars and wrenches to help him with the cleanup. These constructs were initially crude and unstable, often dissolving back into dust after a few minutes as he struggled to maintain the integrity of their nanite matrix. But with each passing day, they became stronger, more complex, more permanent. By the 9th month, he was no longer just building tools. He was building systems. He stood on a cleared section of the beach, facing a mountain of trash. He raised his hands, his eyes glowing with faint green light as he processed the tactical situation. Icarus, project a multi-point grapnel system. Anchor points on that pile of washing machines. Primary material, scavenged steel cable reinforced with a carbon nanotube lattice. Power source, kinetic thrusters. Processing. constructing. Dozens of thin, shimmering tendrils of energy shot from his fingertips. They solidified into high tensile cables, each tipped with a wicked-looking magnetic claw. The claws slammed into the scrap heap with pinpoint accuracy. Izuku braced himself, his feet sinking slightly into the sand as the nanites reinforced his stance. He clenched his fists. On his forearms, two complex, cylindrical devices materialized from light and ambient matter. With a powerful hiss of compressed air, the thrusters fired, and the entire mountain of junk, weighing several tons, was dragged 10 feet across the sand. It was a symphony of controlled power, of applied physics and advanced technology, performed by a conductor who had once been a quirkless nobody. The final month was spent in a frantic, focused haze of combat simulation. Being strong and creative wasn't enough. He had to be fast, efficient, and non-lethal. He started programming the nanites to create autonomous training drones from beach scrap, clumsy, crab-like robots that would scuttle towards him, forcing him to react. He learned to deploy his constructs with split-second timing. A shimmering shield to block a projectile. A burst of kinetic energy from the soles of his feet to dodge. A sticky, net-like construct to ensnare a drone without destroying it. He developed a new projectile, a small, dense pellet of non-conductive ceramic he could form and launch from his fingertips, propelled by a magnetic pulse. They weren't bullets. They were targeted, non-lethal impactors, perfect for hitting joints or disabling robotic sensors. His fighting style wasn't a brawler's. It was the elegant, terrifyingly precise style of a surgeon. On the morning of the UA entrance exam, he stood before the gates of his dream school. He was still the same height, still had the same unruly green hair, but the boy who had walked home in despair 10 months ago was gone. In his place stood a calm, focused young man whose eyes saw the world in a way no one else could. As President Mick's voice boomed over the crowd, Izuku's HUD was already active, passively scanning the other applicants. Subject, Katsuki Bakugo. Quirk analysis, nitroglycerin-like secretions. Explosive potential, high. Temperament, volatile. Subject, Achiko Uraraka. Quirk analysis, gravity nullification via touch. Limitations, nausea with overuse. Threat level, low. Subject, Tenya Ida. Quirk analysis, leg-mounted internal combustion engines. Speed, exceptional. Turning radius, calculable. He wasn't judging them. He was simply collecting data. When the massive gates slid open and President Mike yelled, "Go!" The crowd hesitated for a moment in confusion. Izuku did not. Icarus, kinetic thrusters on my feet. Burst mode. 40% power. Acknowledged. Two subtle, silver and green constructs materialized around his ankles. With a nearly silent whoosh of displaced air, he launched himself forward, a green blur that shot past the stunned crowd and into the sprawling urban cityscape of the exam site. He was the first one in by a full 5 seconds. "What are you waiting for?" President Mick's voice boomed after him. "That kid gets it. There are no countdowns in a real fight." The roar of the crowd starting behind him was drowned out by the metallic shriek of his first opponent. A one-point robot rolled out from an alleyway, its single red eye locking onto him. Izuku didn't break stride. His HUD highlighted the robot's primary joints and its optical sensor. Icarus, form and launch 3 ceramic impactors. Targets designated. Targets acquired. Firing. Thwip. 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 3 tiny, almost invisible pellets shot from his right hand. 2 shattered the robot's ankle joints, causing it to stumble and fall. The third struck its optical sensor, cracking the lens and effectively blinding it. It was disabled, not destroyed. Efficient. Non-lethal. 1 point. He flowed through the city like a ghost. While others, like Kaken, were creating massive, collateral damage-heavy explosions to obliterate the robots, Izuku was a paradigm of efficiency. He saw a 2-pointer bearing down on a terrified-looking girl with purple hair. EMP burst. Localized. A softball-sized orb of shimmering energy formed in his hand. He tossed it underhand, and it pulsed once, emitting no sound but unleashing a wave of electromagnetic energy that fried the robot's circuits instantly. It froze in place, its lights flickering and dying. 2 points. He rounded a corner, and saw a swarm of 1-pointers cornering another applicant. He didn't have time for individual takedowns. Wide dispersal capture net. Material, polymer carbon composite. His hands moved in a complex gesture, as if weaving a cat's cradle. A net of glowing green energy shot forth, expanding rapidly. It blanketed the entire swarm of robots, and as the energy solidified, it became a thick, sticky, and incredibly strong physical net, immobilizing all of them at once. 5 more points. He was a whirlwind. A flick of his wrist to disable a camera. A kinetic pulse to knock a 3-pointer off balance and into a wall. A thin, monomolecular wire, created and dissolved in a split second, to sever a hydraulic line. He racked up points at an astonishing rate, all while his system kept his bioenergy consumption in the green. He was fighting smarter, not harder. The first tremor came with 2 minutes left on the clock. The ground shook violently. Then came the sound, a grinding, earth-shattering roar that dwarfed everything else. From behind a block of skyscrapers, the 0-pointer rose. It was a titan, a monster of metal and wiring that towered over the tallest buildings. Its shadow fell over the entire exam site, and a wave of pure, primal fear washed over the applicants. "It's the 0-pointer!" someone screamed. "Run! It's not worth any points! Just run!" Everyone turned and fled. Izuku, his HUD flickering with overwhelming data streams as it tried to analyze the colossal machine, did the same. Survival was the logical choice, and then he heard the cry. "Ow! I'm stuck!" He stopped, turning back towards the source of the sound. It was the brown-haired, rosy-cheeked girl he'd scanned earlier. Uraraka. A large slab of concrete had pinned her leg, and the 0-pointer, in its slow, inexorable advance, was about to bring its massive fist down right on top of her. Something inside Izuku snapped. All the logic, all the calculated efficiency, vanished, replaced by a single, burning imperative that had driven him his entire life. A hero saves people. All Might's face flashed in his mind. The sludge villain. His own powerlessness. Not again, he thought, a snarl of defiance on his face. Never again. He turned and sprinted towards the danger, towards the girl, towards the giant robot. Icarus! Divert all available power to body reinforcement. Maximum output. Warning! Maximum output will cause severe muscular strain and deplete bioenergy reserves to critical levels. Do it! Acknowledged. A torrent of power flooded his system. He felt as if his very bones were turning to steel, his muscles to coiled springs of impossible strength. The air cracked around him as he broke into a superhuman sprint, the ground crunching under his feet. But a punch wouldn't work. His HUD screamed at him that the robot's armor was too thick, its internal structure too robust. A punch, even one from All Might, might not be enough. He needed something more. He needed a miracle of engineering. He looked at the towering buildings flanking the street, at the tons of steel and concrete. He looked at the robot's massive, lumbering legs. An idea, insane and brilliant, flashed in his mind. It was a plan born of desperation and a deep, intuitive understanding of physics he now possessed. Icarus! Multi-point grapnel system. Target the support structures of the 2 adjacent buildings. We're not pulling it down, we're building a cage. He leaped, using a kinetic burst to launch himself 50 feet into the air. As he soared, his hands became blurs of motion. Dozens, then hundreds of shimmering green cables shot from his body, a storm of high-tech webbing. Half of them slammed into the 0-pointer, anchoring deep into its metallic hide. The other half struck the buildings, biting into concrete and steel. Now! Redirect all kinetic force. Use the robot's own forward momentum to create tension. Calculating tensional forces. Structural integrity of buildings at 45%. Warning. Catastrophic failure imminent. As the 0-pointer took another step, the cables pulled taut. The robot's own immense weight and momentum became its undoing. Groaning shrieks of stressed metal echoed through the street as the buildings began to buckle and crack under the strain. For one terrifying moment, the titan of a machine was held in place, trapped in a massive, improvised net of Izuku's making. It had bought him a few seconds. That's all he needed. He landed beside Uraraka, the impact cratering the asphalt. He didn't even look at the robot. He placed his hands on the massive slab of concrete pinning her. Nanite infusion. Target, concrete slab. Directive, deconstruct. Disintegrate its molecular bonds. Warning. Bioenergy at 12%. This action will trigger a system shutdown. Do it, he screamed, not from his throat, but with his mind, pouring every last ounce of his will and energy into the system. A brilliant green light enveloped the concrete. It didn't explode. It didn't crack. It simply dissolved. It broke down into a cloud of fine gray dust and sand, freeing Uraraka's leg. Time's up! President Mick's voice blared from the speakers. The tension in the cables vanished as Izuku's power gave out. The zero-pointer, freed, took one more step and then froze, its systems deactivating. The buildings groaned but held. Izuku collapsed, falling to his knees. His HUD flashed red before shutting down completely. Bioenergy at 1%. Emergency hibernation mode. The thrumming power inside him went silent. The feeling was terrifying, like losing a sense, like going blind and deaf all at once. He was just a boy again, weak and exhausted, kneeling in the dust of his own impossible feat. He looked over at the girl, who was staring at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, a look of pure, unadulterated awe on her face. He had saved her. He had actually saved someone. A small, genuine smile touched his lips before the sheer exhaustion overwhelmed him, and he pitched forward into darkness. In a darkened observation room high above the exam site, the mood was one of stunned silence. A panel of pro-heroes, the faculty of UA, stared at the myriad screens, one of which was frozen on a close-up of Izuku Midoriya's unconscious face. Well, that was... President Mike started, his usual bombast gone, replaced by bewilderment. Illogical. Shota Aizawa grunted, his eyes narrowed, scrutinizing the footage of the zero-pointer takedown. He didn't destroy a single robot. He dismantled them. Disabled them with pinpoint precision, and that final display, that wasn't a quirk. Quirks are biological functions. That was something else. Power Loader, the hero in the construction-themed suit, leaned forward, replaying the footage of Izuku's constructs. The energy signature is unlike anything I've ever seen, and the constructs themselves, the precision, the complexity, to create high-tensile cables and kinetic thrusters out of thin air? That's not a simple creation quirk. That's high-level, real-time technology fabrication. It's impossible. Principal Nizu, the small, mammalian creature with an intelligence quirk that surpassed any human, steepled his paws, a manic glint in his black eyes. Impossible is such a fascinating word, isn't it? It just means we haven't understood the question yet. He tapped a button, bringing up Izuku's profile. Izuku Midoriya. Quirk, unregistered. Officially listed as quirkless until 10 months ago. And now this. All Might, in his skeletal form, stood in the back of the room, hidden in the shadows. He hadn't said a word. He had just watched, his heart a painful, conflicted knot in his chest. He had seen the boy he had rejected, the boy he had told to be realistic, perform a feat of heroism so spectacular, so intelligent, and so utterly selfless that it took his breath away. The boy hadn't used a punch. He had used his mind. He had analyzed the situation and created a perfect, elegant solution that not only stopped the threat but also protected the civilian. It was everything a hero was supposed to be. Nizu pulled up the final scores. Good heavens! Cementos muttered. Izuku Midoriya. Villain points, 45. Rescue points, 60. Total, 105. He hadn't just passed. He had shattered the all-time record. He neutralized 45 points worth of villains without causing any significant property damage. Nizu mused, his grin widening. And for the selfless and brilliant rescue of another applicant, preventing not only her injury but the potential collapse of 2 city buildings, a perfect score of 60 rescue points, the highest we have ever awarded. Aizawa's eyes were still locked on the screen. I don't care what his score is. There's something wrong here. Something that doesn't add up. His power, it couldn't be erased. I can feel it already. A quirk is a part of the body. His felt like a tool. An external force. Indeed, Nizu chirped, his eyes twinkling with dangerous curiosity. An unknown variable. A new operating system, you might say, running on familiar hardware. I do so love a good puzzle. He turned to the gaunt figure in the corner. Don't you agree, All Might? Toshinori Yagi stepped out of the shadows, his face pale and drawn. He looked at the screen, at the face of the boy he had failed. He had told Izuku he couldn't be a hero, but today, Izuku had proven him wrong in the most spectacular way imaginable. He had become a hero all by himself. Yes, All Might said, his voice barely a whisper. A puzzle. And I have a feeling he's going to redefine the entire game. The first morning of the rest of his life began not with an alarm clock, but with a system boot up. Consciousness returned to Izuku Midoriya in a gentle cascade of sensory input and diagnostic data. Deadless system, online. Host vital signs, nominal. Bioenergy reservoir, 100%. Post-sleep cycle recharge complete. Nanite colony status, stable. All units accounted for. For a fleeting moment, a ghost of his former self surfaced, a boy who would have jolted awake in a panic, terrified of being late. But that anxiety was a foreign signal now, a piece of legacy code from an old, inefficient operating system. The new Izuku simply opened his eyes, the faint green overlay of his HUD already mapping the familiar terrain of his bedroom. The All Might poster on his wall was a data point, object, poster, composition, glossy paper, 4-color ink. Sentimental value to administrator, high. He slid out of bed, his movements fluid and precise. The 10 months of training had not just rebuilt his body, it had optimized it. He moved with an unconscious economy of motion, a quiet confidence that was entirely new. When he looked in the mirror while brushing his teeth, he saw the same green hair, the same freckles, but the eyes looking back were different. They were calmer, more analytical. They held the quiet intensity of someone who was perpetually processing 1,000 times more information than anyone else in the room. His mother had his breakfast ready, a silent testament to her own complex mix of emotions. He could see it in the way her hands trembled slightly as she placed the bowl of rice and miso soup in front of him. Pride, yes, but it was laced with a deep, maternal fear. Her son had walked into the attic a broken boy and emerged as something other. Something powerful and unknown. She saw the new confidence, the way he no longer hunched his shoulders, but she also saw the way his eyes would sometimes unfocus, staring at a point in space, as if reading a book only he could see. Are you nervous, sweetie? She asked, her voice a little too bright. Izuku offered her a genuine, reassuring smile. A little. But I'm more excited. This is it, Mom. This is what we worked for, we. The word hung in the air. He didn't just mean him and his mother. He meant him and Icarus, him and the trillion microscopic machines that now called his body home. The UE uniform felt like a suit of armor, a symbol of a dream he had resurrected from its own ashes. As he walked towards the towering gates of the Hero Academy, the spring air crisp and cool, he felt a sense of belonging he had never known. The world no longer felt like a place he was observing from the outside. He was a part of it now, an active variable in the equation. Midoriya! Good morning! He turned to see the tall, earnest boy from the entrance exam, Tenya Ida, power walking towards him, his arms chopping the air with disciplined precision. Ida! Good morning, Izuku replied, his tone even and friendly. I must apologize for my conduct at the exam orientation, Ida said, bowing a stiff 90 degrees. I misjudged you completely. Your grasp of the true nature of the test was superior to all others. You are the more exemplary student. Before Izuku could respond, a cheerful voice cut in. Oh, it's you! Plain face! Achiko Uraraka bounced towards them, her cheeks flushed with excitement. She stopped in front of Izuku, her brown eyes sparkling. I never got to thank you. For, saving me from that giant robot, and for catching my fall before that. That was amazing. All those cables and that weird thing you did with the concrete. Was that your quirk? It was incredible. The old Izuku would have imploded, turning into a red-faced, stuttering mess. The new Izuku simply smiled. I'm glad you're okay, Uraraka. And my name's Izuku Midoriya. I'm Achiko Uraraka. And this is Ida, she said, gesturing between them. We have met, Ida announced. We are to be classmates in the prestigious Class 1A. Walking through the hallowed halls of UA with his new friends felt surreal. For the first time, he wasn't the odd one out, the quirkless kid to be pitied or scorned. He was just another student. A peer. It was a novel, intoxicating feeling. That feeling lasted until he slid open the massive door to Class 1A and saw him. Katsuki Bakugo was leaning back in his chair, his feet kicked up on the desk, the very picture of arrogant disdain. His crimson eyes snapped towards the door, and when they landed on Izuku, they widened for a fraction of a second before narrowing into slits of pure, incandescent fury. The cheerful atmosphere in the room instantly evaporated. Bakugo shot to his feet, the legs of his chair screeching against the floor. He stomped over to Izuku, his hands already starting to crackle with miniature explosions. Deku! He snarled, the name a venomous curse. What the hell are you doing here? This is the hero course. How did a worthless, quirkless piece of trash like you cheat your way in? The entire class fell silent, watching the confrontation. Ida took a half step forward, ready to intervene, but Izuku subtly held up a hand, stopping him. He met Bakugo's glare without flinching, his internal systems passively analyzing his old tormentor. Subject: Katsuki Bakugo. Heart rate: 135 BPM. Adrenaline levels elevated. Palm temperature increasing. Probability of violence 68%. I passed the exam, just like everyone else, Kakin, Izuku said, his voice calm. Don't you lie to me! Bakugo roared, getting so close Izuku could feel the heat from his palms. You were a pebble. A bug? You don't have a quirk. I've spent 10 years making sure you understood that. So what is it? Some cheap trick? Did you buy some support gear? Did you bribe someone? The accusation hung in the air, thick and ugly. Everyone was staring, waiting for an explanation. How had the supposedly quirkless kid not only gotten in, but also reportedly scored first place? Izuku chose his words carefully, formulating the half-truth he had prepared. I have a power. It just manifested late. It's a tech-based quirk. A technopathy, kind of. He lifted his hand, and a few motes of harmless green light swirled around his fingers before dissipating. It's complicated. It was the perfect lie, vague, plausible in a world of infinite quirks, and impossible for Bakugo to disprove. But it did nothing to soothe the walking inferno in front of him. To Bakugo, this was the ultimate betrayal. For Deku to have a power, and to have hidden it all these years, it recontextualized their entire history, turning Bakugo from the superior prodigy into a cruel, obsessive bully who had been punching down at someone who was only pretending to be weak. It was an intolerable assault on his ego. You're dead, you damn nerd! Bakugo seethed, his hands starting to smoke. If you're just here to make friends, then you can pack up your things and leave. The voice was tired, monotone, and came from a yellow sleeping bag lying on the floor behind Izuku. The students gasped as a man with long, black hair and weary, bloodshot eyes unzipped himself and stood up. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down, Shota Aizawa said, slurping from a jelly pouch. That's not going to work. Time is a precious resource. He scanned the room, his gaze lingering on Izuku and Bakugo for a moment longer than anyone else. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Pleasure to meet you. Now, put these on and meet me on the field. He tossed the UA gym uniform onto his desk. The message was clear. There would be no time for pleasantries. The quirk apprehension test. Aizawa explained it with his signature brand of soul-crushing logic. The ministry was full of bureaucrats who refused to standardize tests. It was his job as a rational hero to gauge their true potential. He added an incentive laced with a threat. And the person who ranks last in total points will be judged as having no potential and will be expelled immediately. A wave of panic rippled through the class. Expulsion on the first day? Izuku's mind, however, was already running calculations. This wasn't a punishment, it was a diagnostic. Aizawa wanted data. He wanted to see how they used their powers under pressure, how they problem-solved. For Izuku, this was a perfect environment. It was a series of controlled experiments. The first test, the 50-meter dash. Ida went first, his leg engines roaring to life, finishing in an impressive 3.04 seconds. Bakugo used his explosions to propel himself like a human rocket, scoring 4.13 seconds. When it was Izuku's turn, he walked to the starting line, his expression serene. Icarus, kinetic thrusters. Low-profile design. 35% power output for a linear 50-meter burst. Acknowledged. Constructing. As the starting pistol fired, two sleek, almost invisible constructs of shimmering green energy wrapped around his calves. There was no smoke, no fire, just a soft thrum and a near-silent displacement of air. He shot forward, his form perfect, his feet barely seeming to touch the ground. He crossed the line in 4.02 seconds. The robotic voice announced the time. Bakugo's head whipped around, his teeth grinding. Ida stared, his eyes wide behind his glasses. A biological engine versus what? There was no noise, no exhaust. It was silent, efficient, and unnervingly clean. Aizawa watched from the side, his eyes narrowed, a tick starting in his jaw. Next, the grip strength test. A muscular boy with multiple arms scored an impressive 540 kilograms. Izuku took the device. Icarus, reinforce my right hand. Apply a nanite lattice to the metacarpals and phalanges. Increase muscle fiber density by 400%. Acknowledged. Bioenergy draw, 2.2%. He felt a familiar vibration as the nanites swarmed, turning his hand into a living vice. He squeezed. The digital display climbed rapidly, 100 kilograms, 250 kilograms, 500 kg, it kept going. System warning, structural integrity of external device compromised. Continued pressure will result in device failure at approximately 750 kilograms. Izuku stopped, easing his grip. The display froze at a staggering 710.5 kilograms. He handed the device back, not a single bead of sweat on his brow. There was no grunt of exertion, no bulging veins, just a calm, controlled application of force. Aizawa made a note on his tablet, his expression unreadable. He continued this way through the other tests. A respectable but not superhuman score on the standing long jump using his thrusters, an easy pass on the side-to-side steps. He was deliberately holding back, showcasing versatility and control rather than overwhelming power. He was an artist using 1,000 different brushes, while his classmates were using powerful but limited hammers, and Aizawa was noticing. The homeroom teacher's gaze became more and more intense with each test Izuku completed. This boy wasn't normal. There were no physical tells that accompanied his quirk. No glow, no transformation, no strain. One moment, his body was normal. The next, it was producing forces that defied physics, then it was normal again. It was like watching a switch being flipped, an application being run. It felt artificial. Finally, it was the last test, the softball throw. The one designed to let students really cut loose. Uraraka had already astonished everyone by touching the ball and sending it into the stratosphere, scoring in infinity. Now all eyes were on the two top-ranked students from the exam, Bakugo and Midoriya. Bakugo stepped into the circle, a feral grin on his face. He wound up, his hand crackling. Die! He screamed, unleashing a massive explosion that propelled the ball like a cannonball. The sonic boom washed over them a second later. 705.2 meters, Aizawa droned. An incredible score. Then, it was Izuku's turn. He took the ball, its weight and texture instantly catalogued by his system. He stepped into the circle, the silence of the field pressing in on him. This was it. This was the moment that had haunted him for 10 months. The last time he'd seen his hero, he was told his body was too weak, that he would break. Now, he had a body that could rewrite itself. He took a deep breath, readying himself. He could feel Aizawa's gaze, a physical weight. It was more than just observation. It was scrutiny. It was suspicion. As Izuku began to wind up his arm, planning to use a simple kinetic pulse, it happened. The air grew heavy. The hairs on his arms stood on end. He felt a strange, chilling sensation, as if his very existence was being questioned. Aizawa's black hair floated upwards, his eyes glowing a terrifying, baleful red. The bandages around his neck, his capture weapon, began to writhe like snakes. I erased your quirk, Aizawa stated, his voice a low, dangerous rasp. The effect was immediate. Across the field, every student who knew of the underground hero Eraserhead felt a shiver of fear. His power was absolute, a hard counter to the vast majority of villains. Izuku froze mid-throw, his arm cocked back. He felt nothing. Absolutely nothing had changed. The HUD in his vision was still there. The bioenergy gauge was still stable. The quiet thrum of the nanite colony in his cells was uninterrupted. He could feel Icarus waiting for a command, a silent partner in his soul. Aizawa took a step forward. From what I can see, you're the same type as the explosive kid. You're planning on generating a massive amount of power and injuring yourself again, aren't you? Expecting someone to come and save you from your own recklessness. Izuku stared at him, a dawning realization spreading across his face. He thinks I have a self-destructive power stockpiling quirk. And he just tried to erase it, but it didn't work. Of course it didn't. How could it? A quirk was a biological function, a unique expression of an individual's DNA. The deadless system was not a part of his biology. It was integrated with it, symbiotic with it, but its source was not genetic. It was technological. You can't erase a machine by looking at it. Aizawa's eyes widened slightly in confusion. The boy wasn't powering down. There was no flicker, no change in his demeanor. He was just standing there, looking at him. My quirk, Izuku said slowly, you can't erase it. The statement was so matter-of-fact, so utterly confident, that it threw Aizawa completely off balance. No one had ever said that to him. No one could say that to him. What did you say? Aizawa growled, the intensity of his glare doubling. Your power cancels out biological abilities. Mine isn't biological, Izuku explained calmly, lowering his throwing arm. He was no longer a nervous student. He was a technician explaining a fundamental principle. It's a foreign system integrated into my body. There's no quirk factor for you to deactivate. The silence on the field was deafening. The other students could only watch, completely lost. Bakugo's jaw was slack with disbelief. Aizawa's mind raced, trying to process the impossible. An ability that couldn't be erased? A power that wasn't a quirk? It contradicted everything he knew. It was a security threat of the highest order. It was an unknown. And Shota Aizawa hated unknowns. What are you? He demanded, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Izuku gave a small, sad smile. Just a boy who found a loophole. With that, he turned his attention back to the task at hand. He wasn't going to punch the ball. He wasn't going to throw it with raw strength. That was the old way, the inefficient way. He was going to demonstrate what the deadless system was truly capable of. He held the ball up in his left hand. His right hand, palm open, hovered just behind it. Icarus, he commanded internally, his focus absolute. Construct a single-stage linear induction cannon. Miniaturized. Power it directly from my bioreserve. Calibrate for maximum exit velocity with minimal energy expenditure. Acknowledged. Constructing electromagnetic launch system. The air around his right hand shimmered. Nanites, drawing ambient particulates and energy from the air, swarmed and solidified. In the space of a single second, a complex, semi-translucent green construct formed around his forearm. It wasn't a bulky weapon, but a sleek, elegant cradle of interlocking rings and conduits, glowing with a soft, internal light. It hummed with contained power. He placed the ball into the cradle. It levitated perfectly in the center, held in place by a low-power magnetic field. Fire. There was no explosion. No roar. There was only a sharp, high-pitched seetseep. And a flash of green light. A series of electromagnetic rings fired in perfect sequence, accelerating the ball from 0 to an impossible speed in a fraction of an inch. A miniature sonic boom cracked the air, and a perfect, circular shockwave of displaced dust expanded from his hand. The ball was just gone. It didn't arc. It didn't fly. It simply vanished into the blue sky, a white speck disappearing in the blink of an eye. Izuku's arm cannon dissolved into motes of light, leaving his arm completely bare, as if it had never been there. He lowered his hand, his expression calm. The entire class was frozen in a state of collective shock. Even Bakugo was speechless, his face a mask of horrified confusion. Aizawa's capture weapon went limp, his hair falling back into place as his quirk deactivated. He stared at his phone, waiting for the distance tracker. A few seconds later, it beeped. He looked at the screen, then he looked at it again. His bloodshot eyes were wider than anyone had ever seen them. He slowly turned the phone around for the class to see. The screen displayed 3 characters: error. The tracking satellite lost it, Aizawa said, his voice a flat, hollow sound of disbelief. It was still accelerating when it left the atmosphere. Later, in the same darkened observation room, the faculty watched the footage for the 20th time. On one screen, a slow-motion replay showed the impossible construct forming and firing. On another, satellite tracking data showed the ball's trajectory, a straight line that shot up through the troposphere, the stratosphere, and beyond, before the signal was lost. A gravimetric induction cannon, power loader breathed, his voice full of reverence and terror. The theory has been around for decades, but the power requirements, the material science, it's all purely theoretical. No one has ever been able to build one, let alone one that is portable, self-powered, and can be materialized out of thin air. Nizu was practically vibrating in his chair, his usual grin stretched into a rictus of pure, unadulterated intellectual ecstasy. It isn't a quirk. The boy was telling the truth. Erasure had no effect. We ran the energy signature analysis from the exam and the test today. It doesn't match any known quirk phenomena. It is, for all intents and purposes, a technological energy source. All Might, in his skeletal form, watched the screen, a profound sense of unease chilling him to the bone. He saw the boy he knew, the kind, heroic Fanbo, but he was wrapped in something else, something alien and powerful beyond comprehension. The name his father had chosen for the project, Deadless, echoed in his mind. A brilliant creator, but one whose creations led to tragedy. What does this mean, Nizu? Tashinori asked, his voice low. It means, Nizu said, turning his black, beady eyes to the hero, that we have a student who is not bound by the same rules as the rest of the world. A boy whose abilities cannot be negated by our most effective countermeasure. A boy who wields a technology so advanced it may as well be magic. He is a ghost in the machine of our superhuman society. Nizu's smile returned, sharper than before. He is either the greatest potential hero we have ever seen, or the most significant potential threat. I've already flagged him. He will be under my personal observation from now on. He took a long, happy sip of his tea. Oh, this year is going to be wonderfully interesting. Down on the field, Aizawa handed Izuku back his test results. He had placed first, easily. But as Izuku took the tablet, Aizawa's hand clamped down on his wrist. His grip was like iron. I don't know what you are, Midoriya, Aizawa said, his voice low enough that only Izuku could hear. But you're in my class now. That makes you my responsibility. I will find out what you're hiding, and if I find for 1 second that you are a threat to your classmates, or this school, I will expel you myself. Do you understand? Izuku met his teacher's intense gaze. He saw the suspicion, the distrust, the professional paranoia of a man who had seen the worst of the world. And he understood it. He was an anomaly. An unknown. And in the hero world, unknowns were dangerous. Yes, sensei, Izuku replied, his voice unwavering. I understand completely. As he walked away to join Uraraka and Ida, who were babbling with a mixture of awe and confusion, he felt the weight of his new reality settle upon him. He had passed the test. He had proven he belonged, but in doing so, he had painted a massive target on his back. He had shown the world a glimpse of the ghost in his machine, and now, everyone, his friends, his teachers, his rivals, and the hidden figures watching from the shadows, would be trying to figure out how to control it. His life as a normal student was over before it had even begun. The atmosphere in the subterranean monitoring room was thick with anticipation. On a bank of high-definition screens, the first teams for the battle trial were displayed. It was a place of sterile observation, but the tension radiating from the man at the central console was anything but. The future of heroism is forged in the crucible of conflict. All Might's voice, amplified and broadcast to the students waiting in the wings, was a booming wave of pure motivational force. It is a contest of wills, of strategy, and of power. Your first trial begins now. He struck a pose, a perfect embodiment of the symbol of peace. But as soon as he was sure the camera feed had cut, the grandiose posture deflated. In his skeletal form, Toshinori Yagi leaned heavily against the console, a thin trickle of steam escaping from his mouth as he coughed into his fist. His eyes, sunken in their sockets, were fixed on two screens in particular. One showed Izuku Midoriya, standing calmly beside a nervously vibrating Achiko Uraraka. The other showed Katsuki Bakugo, his hands shoved in his pockets, radiating a silent, murderous aura that was palpable even through the screen. Team A, the heroes, Izuku Midoriya and Achiko Uraraka. Team D, the villains, Katsuki Bakugo and Tenya Ida. All Might announced into the microphone, his voice regaining its heroic timbre. The villains will enter the building first and have 5 minutes to prepare. The heroes will follow. The objective is for the heroes to either secure the nuclear weapon prop or capture both villains. The villains win by either protecting the weapon for the duration of the trial, or by capturing the heroes. Now, begin. As Bakugo and Ida disappeared into the nondescript 5-story building, All Might watched Izuku's team. The boy wasn't fidgeting. He wasn't looking around nervously. He was standing perfectly still, his eyes slightly unfocused. Toshinori knew that look now. It was the look of a user accessing their interface, of a pilot in their cockpit. The boy was in his own world, a world of pure data. That power, Toshinori thought, a familiar unease coiling in his gut. It is magnificent. Controlled. Precise. But it is cold. It lacks the fire, the raw, untamed spirit of One for All. And yet, he uses it with the heart of a true hero. What does that make him? Outside the training building, Izuku was indeed in another world. Are you okay, Deku? Uraraka asked, bouncing on the balls of her feet. You're really quiet. Are you thinking up a plan? Because I'm not great at planning, but I'm a really good listener. I am, Izuku said, his voice distant for a second before it sharpened with focus. Give me a moment. He had requested the building's blueprints from All Might, a request that had been granted after a moment of surprised hesitation. The file was now displayed in his HUD, a translucent 3D model of the building floating in his vision. Icarus overlaid the blueprints with the building's live sensor data. I need heat signatures, structural weak points, and any active electronic systems. Acknowledged. Processing. The blueprint became a living thing. Red-orange blurs indicated Ida and Bakugo moving on the 5th floor. He saw the building's power conduits, its ventilation systems, its reinforced pillars and its weaker drywall partitions. It was like having X-ray vision and a tactical map rolled into one. Okay, he said, turning to Uraraka, his eyes now clear and present. Here's the situation. Ida is disciplined and fast, but he's predictable. He'll play the role of a villain perfectly, which means he'll stay and guard the weapon. He won't leave his post. Kaken is the opposite. He's not going to play their game. He's going to play his game, which is... Uraraka prompted. He's coming for me, Izuku stated with absolute certainty. This isn't about the objective for him. It's personal. He'll ignore you completely and make a beeline for me the second we enter. He'll be aiming to incapacitate me, to prove he's superior. That's our advantage. Uraraka looked confused. Having an angry guy with explosion powers coming straight for you is an advantage? It is when we know it's coming, Izuku confirmed. He pointed to a spot on the blueprint overlay in his vision. I'll engage him. Keep him occupied. While he's focused entirely on me, you'll make your way up to the 5th floor. Your quirk is the perfect tool for a stealth mission. You can make yourself lighter to move silently, and if you can just touch the weapon, we win. Ida won't be expecting a solo infiltration. He looked at her, his analytical gaze softening. Can you do that? Uraraka's nervousness was replaced by a look of fierce determination. She pumped a fist. Leave it to me. I'll be the best stealthy hero ever. Good. Izuku looked back at the building, his expression hardening. My job is to be the perfect distraction. Icarus, activate combat protocols. Monitor my bioenergy levels and system temperature. Alert me at 50% and 25% thresholds. Combat protocols active. System monitoring engaged. Good luck, Administrator. The 5 minutes were up. The buzzer sounded. Hero team, you may now enter! Izuku and Uraraka slipped through a ground floor window, their movements synchronized and quiet. The interior was a maze of gray corridors and empty rooms, the air thick with the smell of concrete and dust. Remember the plan, Izuku whispered, his HUD already painting threat vectors on the walls, showing the most likely angles of attack. Go, Uraraka nodded, touching her fingertips together. Release! She made herself lighter and scurried away, her footsteps making no sound. Izuku was alone. He walked calmly down the center of the main corridor, his footsteps echoing deliberately. He was an open target. He was bait. He didn't have to wait long. The explosion was deafening. It came from a blind corner ahead, a concussive blast of heat and force that ripped a chunk out of the wall where Izuku's head had been a millisecond before. He was already moving, his kinetic thrusters firing in a silent, instantaneous burst that shifted him 5 feet to the left. Bakugo came flying out of the smoke, propelled by his explosions, a wild, predatory grin on his face. Found you, you cheating bastard! He was a blur of motion, a dervish of orange and black. He fired off another blast with his right hand, using the recoil to pivot in midair and swing around with a powerful left hook aimed at Izuku's head. Izuku's HUD was a flurry of calculations. Threat detected, kinetic/thermal blast. Velocity, 120 m/s. Projected impact point, left temporal lobe. Probability of lethality, 21%. Probability of incapacitation, 92%. Recommended countermeasure, shield construct. Angle, 37 degrees. Density, 15%. Execute, Izuku thought. A hexagonal shield of green hard light flickered into existence, perfectly angled to deflect the blast. The explosion washed over it, the force scattering harmlessly. At the same moment, Izuku ducked under Bakugo's swing, the wind from the punch ruffling his hair. He dropped low, sweeping his leg out. It wasn't a normal sweep. A low-power kinetic pulse, invisible to the naked eye, erupted from his foot, striking Bakugo's ankle and knocking his pivot leg out from under him. Bakugo hit the ground hard, his arrogance momentarily replaced by shock. He had never, in his entire life, failed to land a hit on Deku. He had always been too fast, too powerful. But this was different. Deku hadn't just dodged. He had moved before the attack was even fully launched. He hadn't just blocked. He had created a perfect counter. How? Bakugo snarled, pushing himself up. I've been studying you for 10 years, Kaken, Izuku said, his voice level. He was already backing away, creating distance. I know every move you're going to make. It was the truth, but a deeper truth lay in the system humming beneath his skin. He didn't just know Bakugo's moves. His system was analyzing his body language, the minute flexing of his muscles, the subtle shifts in his center of gravity. He wasn't predicting Bakugo. He was reading him like an open book. You think you're so clever, you damn nerd? Bakugo roared, his rage escalating. You were hiding this all along? Lying to me? Looking down on me? I'll kill you, he charged, no longer using calculated blasts, but unleashing a torrent of explosions, turning the corridor into a hellscape of fire and concussive force. He was trying to overwhelm him, to fill the air with so much chaos that prediction would be impossible. In the monitoring room, the students watched, mesmerized. Whoa, Bakugo is going all out! Kirishima exclaimed. Midori is just dodging? How is he so fast? His movements, Momo Yayorozu observed, her analytical mind at work. They're not wasteful. There's no wasted energy. Every step, every duck, is the absolute minimum required to evade the attack. It's inhumanly efficient. All Might clenched his fist. He's right. Young Midoriya isn't fighting him. He's solving him. Like a math problem. But can he handle the sheer ferocity of young Bakugo? That boy's rage is a power all its own. Back in the corridor, Izuku was a ghost. He flowed around the explosions, his thrusters firing in microscopic bursts, his shields flickering into existence just long enough to deflect shrapnel before dissolving. He was untouchable. But the strain was beginning to show. A small, amber icon appeared in his HUD. Warning, system heat at 55%. Rapid construct manifestation is increasing core temperature. Efficiency will decrease if current rate is maintained. It's a resource battle, Izuku realized. Kakin stamina versus my bioenergy. He needed to change tactics. He couldn't just defend. He fired a series of ceramic impactors from his fingertips. They were small, fast, and aimed at Bakugo's joints. Bakugo, however, was a combat genius. He used his explosions to create a screen of smoke and to alter his trajectory unpredictably, causing the pellets to whiz harmlessly past him. "Is that all you've got, Deku?" Bakugo screamed, his grin widening as he landed and crouched, his hands aimed at the floor. "Pathetic little tricks! Let's see you calculate this." He unleashed a massive, sustained blast downwards, using the explosion to shatter the concrete floor. The entire section of the corridor collapsed, sending Izuku and Bakugo tumbling down into the floor below amidst a shower of dust and debris. It was a brilliant, chaotic move. It reset the battlefield, changed the terrain, and was designed to disorient Izuku's analytical style. For a normal person, it would have worked. But as he fell, Izuku's HUD was already mapping the new environment, calculating the trajectory of every piece of falling concrete. Structural failure detected. New environment mapping complete. Host is unharmed. He landed in a crouch, perfectly balanced, while Bakugo landed more clumsily a few yards away. Before the dust had even settled, Izuku acted. He slammed his palm against a large, load-bearing pillar. Icarus, high-frequency resonance pulse. Target, that pillar. Acknowledged. A wave of visible vibration shot from his hand into the concrete. The pillar didn't explode, it shuddered violently. On the floor above, where Ida was standing guard, the ground shook as if from an earthquake. "What was that?" Ida exclaimed, steadying himself. Uraraka, who had been creeping up the stairwell, seized the opportunity. While Ida was distracted by the shaking, she slipped past his line of sight, flattening herself against the wall. Bakugo saw the pillar vibrate, and instantly understood. "You're trying to distract me? Trying to help that floaty bitch?" he roared. "Don't you dare look away from me! I'm your opponent!" His rage reached a new peak. This wasn't just a fight anymore, it was an execution of his pride. He raised his gauntlet, the one shaped like a massive grenade. In the monitoring room, All Might's blood ran cold. "Young Bakugo, don't! You'll kill him!" he yelled into the comms. "He'll be fine if he dodges!" Bakugo screamed back, his voice a distorted howl of fury. He pulled the pin. Izuku's HUD went completely red. Catastrophic threat detected. Massive explosive yield imminent. Energy signature exceeds all previous readings. Evade! 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 There was no time to dodge. The sheer area of effect would be too large. He had only one option: endure. Icarus! All available power to a multi-layered, ablative shield. Frontal arc. Reinforce my body. Everything you've got. Warning. This action will expend over 60% of remaining bioenergy. System core will reach critical temperature. Now, a torrent of energy poured out of him. A massive, complex shield of interlocking emerald hexagons materialized in front of him. It wasn't just one layer. It was a dozen, each designed to absorb a different aspect of the blast: heat, kinetic force, shrapnel. At the same time, his own body was encased in a thin, shimmering layer of hard light armor. The world turned white. The sound was a physical blow, a deafening roar that shook the entire building to its foundations. A wave of incandescent energy, a focused, weaponized version of Bakugo's quirk, slammed into Izuku's shield. The first layer vaporized instantly. The second, third, and fourth shattered like glass. The fourth slammed him backwards, his feet digging trenches in the concrete floor. His armor cracked under the strain. Heat levels critical. 98% of operational maximum. Bioenergy reserves at 15%. Warning! System lag detected. Sensors compromised. Thermal throttling engaged. Non-essential processes offline. His HUD flickered and distorted. The crisp green data streams became glitchy and staticky. The world swam in and out of focus. A splitting headache erupted behind his eyes, the feeling of a processor being pushed past its absolute limit. He tasted copper in his mouth. He felt like he was burning from the inside out. The nanites in his body were screaming, overworked and overheating. The explosion subsided. Half the building was blown out, exposing them to the open air. Bakugo stood panting in the smoke, his arm aching from the recoil, a triumphant, manic look in his eyes. Izuku was still standing. Barely. His shield was gone. His armor was gone. The sleeve of his hero costume was shredded, his arm underneath red and raw from the radiant heat. He was swaying on his feet, his breath coming in ragged gasps. See? Bakugo panted, a wild grin splitting his face. You're not untouchable, Deku. You're just a cheap magic trick. And I'm going to break you. He charged again, his movements faster, more precise now that Izuku was clearly injured. Izuku tried to raise a shield, but the construct sputtered and died, his system lagging too much to form it in time. He dodged, but his movements were slower, clumsier. A searing pain shot across his ribs as Bakugo landed a glancing blow with a small explosion. Izuku grunted, stumbling back. He was losing. He couldn't keep this up. His system was failing, and without it, he was just a boy against a monster. Think, Izuku, think! He screamed at himself. He couldn't win with power. He couldn't win with defense. His only option was the one he'd started with, strategy. He looked up at the gaping hole in the ceiling, 5 stories above them. He could see the bottom of the room where Ida and the bomb were. Uraraka had to be close. He just needed to buy her one last chance. As Bakugo flew at him, ready for the final blow, Izuku did something unexpected. He didn't dodge. He didn't block. He charged forward, straight at Bakugo, his left arm raised as if to throw a punch. Bakugo's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in contempt. Finally decided to fight back, you coward! He met Izuku's charge head-on, his right hand crackling, ready to intercept the punch with a point-blank explosion. But Izuku's punch was a feint. At the last second, his left arm shot upwards, past Bakugo's head, aiming at the ceiling above. Icarus! Last of the energy. One single, massive kinetic pulse. Upwards. Critical energy warning. System shutdown imminent. Izuku screamed, a raw, human sound of pure, desperate effort. The last dregs of his power erupted from his outstretched hand in a massive, visible cone of force. It wasn't an attack on Bakugo. It was an attack on the building itself. The pulse struck the already damaged floor of the 5th story. The concrete, weakened by the earlier resonance blast and Bakugo's super move, shattered completely. The entire floor gave way. Upstairs, Uraraka had been cornered by a vigilant Ida. It's over, hero! Your partner is defeated, and you are trapped. Surrender! Suddenly, the floor beneath them exploded upwards. Debris rained down everywhere. Ida, caught by surprise, was pelted with concrete, his movements hampered. Uraraka, however, had been waiting for the signal. She used her quirk on herself and on a large piece of pillar, making them both weightless. Sorry, but it's time for my super move, she yelled, swinging the makeshift pillar like a baseball bat. Comet home run! She smashed the pillar into the cloud of smaller debris, sending a shotgun blast of concrete shrapnel flying through the room. While Ida was forced to shield his face and engines, Uraraka floated over the chaos, her eyes locked on the prize. She soared through the air and wrapped her arms around the massive bomb prop. I've got it! She screamed. Down below, Izuku heard her cry. He smiled, a bloody, exhausted, but triumphant smile. Bakugo was frozen in midair, his attack forgotten. He stared up at the scene of his defeat, his face a mask of utter, soul-crushing disbelief. He had been so focused on Deku, so obsessed with breaking him, that he had completely forgotten the objective. He had lost. Not to Deku's power, but to his brain. The hero team. Why-ins! All Might's voice boomed through the building. The moment the word, wins, registered, the last of Izuku's strength vanished. The adrenaline that had been holding him together evaporated. The pain, which had been a dull roar, became a symphony of agony. His overstrained muscles screamed. His head felt like it was going to split open. The HUD in his vision, which had been a glitchy mess, flashed one final message in stark, red letters. System failure. Forced reboot required. Powering down, the world went silent. The data streams, the sensory input, the quiet hum of the nanites, it all vanished. He felt them, the trillions of machines inside him, going dormant, their lights winking out. The sudden absence of their power was a physical shock, like having a limb amputated. He was just Izuku Midoriya again, a quirkless, bleeding, and utterly exhausted 14-year-old boy. His legs gave out. He pitched forward, his eyes rolling back in his head. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Bakugo's horrified, uncomprehending face. Then nothing. He collapsed onto the rubble-strewn floor, a puppet with its strings cut, proving to everyone watching that even a boy with the power to build miracles was still, in the end, painfully, vulnerably human. The return to consciousness was a slow, agonizing crawl out of a deep, staticky abyss. There was no clean system boot up this time, no crisp diagnostic report greeting him on the edge of awareness. There was only a dull, throbbing ache that seemed to emanate from every cell in his body, a phantom echo of the system's violent shutdown. It was the biological price of overclocking the machine. Izuku's eyelids fluttered open, revealing the pristine white ceiling of Recovery Girl's infirmary. The air smelled of antiseptic and candy. He tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness and nausea washed over him, and a gentle but firm hand pushed him back down onto the pillow. "Not so fast, dearie," a familiar voice chirped. "You gave that magnificent system of yours quite the scare. It's still in the middle of a full diagnostic reboot." Recovery Girl, Chio Shizenji, peered down at him over her glasses, her expression a practiced mix of grandmotherly concern and professional sternness. She held a syringe in one hand, though Izuku noted with some relief that it was empty. "What happened?" he rasped, his throat dry. "What happened is that you pushed your unique physiology far past its operational limits," she explained, tapping a monitor beside his bed. It displayed a complex, fluctuating energy pattern that Izuku recognized as his own biosignature. "Your friend with the explosions did a number on you, minor burns, deep muscle bruising from the blast wave, but most of the damage was internal. Systemic energy depletion, neural strain, cellular exhaustion. It's like you ran a marathon with every fiber of your being at once. My quirk can heal the physical damage, but the energy recovery is all on you. Or rather, on those little machines of yours." As if on cue, a faint, familiar green text box flickered into existence in the corner of his vision. It was glitchy, parts of the text corrupted with digital artifacts, like a bad video feed. D. Lose Sys. Reb T. Pro S. 87%. And it. C. L. New York. Stable Zing. H. SD by E. Ergi. Crit. Cal. Rare. Ooting. Service. P. W. R2. LL. Larar. Pair. He was coming back online. The feeling was less like a switch being flipped and more like a frozen computer slowly unfreezing, one stuttering process at a time. "You won, you know," Chio said, her tone softening. "A reckless, dangerous, and frankly idiotic strategy, but a successful one. You have the mind of a true strategist, Midoriya. Just try not to destroy the body it's housed in." The door to the infirmary hissed open, and All Might, in his skeletal form, stepped inside. His face was a canvas of conflicting emotions, pride, worry, and a deep, unsettling curiosity. "Young Midoriya," he began, his voice a low rumble. "Are you all right?" "I'm rebooting," Izuku managed, a weak smile touching his lips. All Might pulled a chair up to the bedside. "Your performance was astounding. You defeated young Bakugo not with power, but with intellect. You understood him, you understood the battlefield, and you understood your partner's strengths. You embodied the very essence of what it means to be a hero." The praise from his idol, even in this diminished form, sent a warm glow through Izuku's exhausted body. But the hero's expression quickly turned serious. "However," All Might continued, leaning forward, "I must confess my concern. That power of yours, it has limits. Very dangerous ones, it seems. And the way you use it, it's so controlled, so analytical. There are times when a hero must act on instinct, on raw emotion. I worry that you rely too much on the machine, and not enough on your own heart. Before Izuku could formulate a response, the glitchy text in his vision finally solidified. Deadless system reboot complete. All protocols nominal. Running level 3 diagnostics. Warning, widespread nanite fatigue detected. Estimated 12-hour recovery period before full combat effectiveness is restored. Administrator, I advise against any further system-intensive activities. Noted Icarus, Izuku thought, a wave of relief washing over him as the familiar, stable connection to his internal world was restored. He looked at All Might. My heart is what tells me what to do, All Might. The system just tells me the most efficient way how to do it. Today, my heart told me to save my partner and win, and that required pushing the system to its breaking point. It was a calculated risk. The answer was so mature, so unnervingly logical, that it left Tashinori momentarily speechless. He was used to dealing with hot-blooded teenagers, with passions and insecurities. He was not used to dealing with a young man who spoke of heroism in terms of calculated risks and system efficiency. It was both awe-inspiring and deeply alien. A few days later, Class 1A was abuzz with excitement. Aizawa, looking as though he'd just woken up from a nap in a coffin, droned on about their next major training exercise. Today's training will be a little different, he announced. You'll be supervised by myself, All Might, and one other faculty member. We'll be conducting rescue training for different types of disasters. He pressed a button, and a panel in the wall slid open to reveal numbered cases. You can decide if you want to wear your costumes or not, as some of them might not be suited for the activity at hand. The training facility is a bit of a ways off, so we'll be taking a bus. The mood on the bus was light and cheerful. His classmates, having witnessed his fight with Bakugo, now treated Izuku with a newfound respect, tinged with a healthy dose of awe and confusion. They peppered him with questions about his quirk, which he deflected with vague, practiced answers about technopathy and late-blooming abilities. He felt a pang of guilt at the deception, but the truth was too complex, too dangerous, to share. He sat beside Tsuyu, the frog-like girl whose blunt honesty was both refreshing and slightly intimidating. Midoriya, she said, tapping her chin with a finger. Your power is really amazing. But it seems sort of similar to All Might's in terms of destructive potential. Karo, Izuku froze. It was a casual observation, but it hit dangerously close to a truth only he and a select few knew, that he was All Might's chosen successor, at least in spirit. Oh, you think so? I don't know, mine's not really about strength. He stammered, his old habits flaring up. Before the conversation could continue, they arrived. The facility was immense, a massive dome that looked like a slice of a futuristic city. Stepping inside, the students gasped. Before them lay a sprawling landscape of simulated disaster zones, a landslide, a fire zone, a floodplain, a collapsed cityscape. It was the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ. Greeting them at the entrance was the Space Hero, 13. The rescue-oriented hero launched into a passionate speech about the dangers of their quirks, about how powers designed for combat could so easily kill. Izuku listened intently, his system passively cataloging the hero's suit and abilities. Subject 13. Quirk Black Hole. Ability: creates a miniature vortex that suctions and vaporizes matter. Dangerously unstable. Highly effective for debris clearance. As 13 was wrapping up their speech, the lights in the facility flickered and died, plunging them into a dim, emergency-lit twilight. The central water fountain sputtered and died. At the heart of the plaza, a swirling vortex of dark, purple-black mist began to coalesce. It was a sickly, unnatural phenomenon, and a cold dread, colder than any system warning, washed over Izuku. From the center of the mist, a hand emerged. Then a face, covered in what looked like a dismembered hand. A man, pale and lanky, with scratch marks all over his neck, stepped out of the portal, his red eyes scanning the assembled students with a look of manic, childish glee. And then more came. Dozens of them. A motley, terrifying collection of thugs and criminals, pouring out of the portal like termites from a rotten log. What's going on? Kirishima asked, taking a step forward. Did the training start already? Whoa, they even got fake villains! Aizawa's entire demeanor shifted. The lazy, tired teacher vanished, replaced by the razor-sharp focus of the pro-hero Eraserhead. "Stay back!" he yelled, pulling his yellow goggles over his eyes. "Those are real villains!" Panic erupted. Real villains? Here? At UA? Izuku's mind, however, had gone preternaturally calm. The deadless system, designed for survival and threat analysis, kicked into high gear. Alert! Multiple unidentified hostiles detected. Threat level, severe. Scanning. His HUD began to paint red outlines over the villains, tagging them with threat assessments based on their weaponry and physical tells. Most were low-level threats, street thugs with minor quirks, but 3 stood out. The man with the hands all over him was an enigma. His biosigns were erratic, his quirk unreadable. He was the leader. The swirling mist itself was a person, a being of pure warp gate energy. That was their entry and their escape. And then there was the third one. A hulking, bird-like monstrosity standing beside the leader. It was massive, its muscles unnaturally bulky, its brain exposed, its eyes vacant and staring. Izuku's scanner raced over it, and the data that came back made his blood run cold. Subject: unidentified bioengineered creature. Analysis: multiple quirk signatures detected. Genetic splicing is unstable and violent. Primary abilities: super strength, hyperregeneration, shock absorption. Warning: threat level, catastrophic. Rivals all might in pure physical output. This wasn't just an invasion. This was an assassination attempt. 13. Protect the students, Aizawa ordered, his capture weapon already writhing. Kaminari, try to get a signal out with your quirk. Yes, sir! Aizawa leaped into battle, a whirlwind of motion, erasing quirks and disabling villains with brutal efficiency. He was a one-man army, but he was hopelessly outnumbered. The mist villain, Kurogyri, flowed forward, blocking the students' escape. Greetings. We are the League of Villains. We have taken the liberty of inviting ourselves into this haven of justice to say hello, and to say goodbye to the symbol of peace. His misty form began to expand, a dome of darkness preparing to envelop them. My role is to scatter you all and torture you to death. Bakugo and Kirishima charged forward, their attacks passing harmlessly through his gaseous body. Before anyone else could react, the dome of darkness collapsed on them. Izuku felt a disorienting, gut-wrenching sensation of being twisted and pulled through space. But just as the warp began to take hold, his system reacted instinctively. Foreign spatial anomaly detected. Engaging countermeasures. Deploying localized reality anchor. A barely visible shimmer of green energy, a ripple in space-time, expanded from Izuku's body in a 5-foot radius. For a split second, he felt an immense pressure, as if 2 opposing forces were trying to tear him apart. The warping sensation intensified, then snapped. He was still standing in the same spot. So were Aji and Mineta, who had been right next to him. They looked around, dazed and confused, as their other classmates vanished, scattered across the facility. Kurogyri's yellow eyes widened in what could only be described as shock. What? You resisted my warp? Impossible! The man with the hands, Tamura Shigaraki, stopped scratching his neck, his gaze snapping towards Izuku. He had been expecting screaming children, chaos, fear. He had not been expecting a student to simply nullify his subordinate's primary ability. Kurogyri, what was that? Shigaraki asked, his voice a dry, raspy scratch. You said you could scatter them all? Are you glitching? No, Master Shigaraki. Kurogyri replied, his form wavering. That boy, he repelled it. He is an unforeseen variable. A cheat. Shigaraki's gaze fixed on Izuku, a burning, obsessive curiosity igniting in his red eyes. He tilted his head, like a predator studying a strange new prey. A cheat, huh? I hate cheaters. They ruin the game. Izuku knew he was in trouble. He had just painted a massive target on his back. He grabbed Mineta and Aji. We need to move. Now! He pulled them towards the edge of the plaza, his mind racing. Aizawa was still fighting, but he was tiring, the sheer number of villains wearing him down. They needed to get to him, to help him. They were cut off. Shigaraki, moving with an eerie, shuffling speed, appeared before them, the monstrous bird creature, the Numu, at his side. Now, no running away, Shigaraki said, a twisted smile playing on his lips. I want to see what makes the little cheat tick. He gestured lazily at Izuku. Numa, get him. But don't break him too much. I want to play with him. The Numa let out a guttural, inhuman shriek and charged. It was like watching a mountain move. The ground shook with its footsteps. It was impossibly fast for its size. Ajiri launched her tongue, wrapping it around Izuku and pulling him out of the Numa's path just as its massive fist smashed the ground where he'd been standing, creating a crater in the solid rock. Mineta, screaming in terror, threw his sticky purple balls, which bounced harmlessly off the creature's tough hide. Izuku's mind was a whirlwind of tactical analysis. He couldn't fight it head-on. That was suicide. He needed to support Aizawa. He needed a distraction. As the Numa turned, its vacant eyes locking onto him again, Izuku saw Aizawa in the distance. The hero was faltering, his elbow caught in Shigaraki's five-fingered grip. The skin and cloth were decaying, turning to dust. Shigaraki's quirk. Decay. And then the Numa was on his teacher, smashing his head into the ground again and again. The sound was sickening. No! Izuku screamed, a primal, instinctive rage overriding his tactical mind for a moment. He had to do something. The doors were blasted open at that moment, All Might appearing at the top of the stairs, his face a mask of thunderous fury. I am here! But he was late. Shigaraki was gloating, Aizawa was broken, and the Numa was turning its attention to the symbol of peace. The battle that followed was legendary. It was a clash of titans, a flurry of blows that sent shockwaves through the entire facility. All Might was landing hundreds of punches that could level city blocks, but the Numa wasn't just enduring them. It was absorbing them. It wasn't even being pushed back. It's no use! Shigaraki cackled. My Numa has shock absorption. All your fancy punches are just tickling him. All Might was trapped, his back held in the iron grip of the Numa as Kurojairi opened a warp gate, preparing to slice the hero in half. Izuku, hiding with his friends, watched in horror. His scanner, which had been continuously analyzing the Numa throughout the fight, was screaming at him. Continuous analysis complete. Noma's shock absorption is a biological function, not a nullification. Kinetic energy is dispersed throughout its muscle tissue. Hyperregeneration repairs damage instantaneously. However, a flaw has been detected. The system is finite. It has a threshold. Hypothesis: extreme, focused vibrations at a cellular level may overload the regenerative properties faster than the shock absorption can disperse the energy. The system would suffer a cascade failure. Weakness detected. A weakness. A tiny, almost impossible to exploit weakness. But it was there. All Might was struggling, his time limit ticking down. Bakugo and Kirishima had joined the fray, trying to help pin Kurojairi. Todoroki had arrived, freezing half the Numa to help All Might escape the warp gate. But the Numa simply shattered the ice and regenerated, its strength undiminished. They were at a stalemate, and All Might was the only one with a clock. Izuku knew what he had to do. It was another calculated risk. A suicidal one. Ajiri, Mineta, get ready to run, he said, his voice deadly serious. Before they could protest, he broke from cover. Icarus, all available non-essential power to kinetic thrusters. And give me reinforced gauntlets. Not for punching. For surgery. Acknowledged. Constructing. He shot across the plaza, a green blur of motion. Shigaraki saw him coming. The cheat is back for more? Numa, smash him! The Numa, still grappling with All Might, detached one massive arm and swung it at the approaching boy. It was a blow that would have vaporized anyone else, but Izuku didn't try to block it. He didn't try to stop it. He slid, his thrusters firing in reverse, coming to a halt just inches from the monster's leg. He was too small, too close for its clumsy, oversized limbs to target effectively. Two complex, shimmering green gauntlets had formed over his hands. They weren't bulky. They were sleek, almost delicate, and along the knuckles and fingertips, they hummed with a visible, high-frequency vibration. They were resonant blades, tools designed not for blunt force, but for precise, disruptive impact. He slammed both hands against the Numa's massive, tree-trunk-like knee joint. Icarus, full power to the resonant blades. Match the frequency I need to disrupt its cellular cohesion. Matching frequency. Engaging. A high-pitched, piercing whine filled the air. Where Izuku's hands touched the Numu, its dark purple skin began to turn gray and brittle, cracking like dry clay. The resonant energy was bypassing the shock absorption entirely, attacking the cells directly, shaking them apart faster than they could regenerate. The Numu let out a shriek of what might have been pain, its knee buckling. Its grip on All Might faltered for a fraction of a second. It was the opening the hero needed. Young Midoriya! All Might bellowed, his eyes widening in understanding. Get away! All Might broke free, a renewed fire in his eyes. He understood. The boy hadn't tried to hurt the monster. He had created a weak point. He had exposed a flaw. You villains are truly foolish! All Might roared, his body beginning to steam as he pushed past his limits. You think this creature is my equal? You think a cheap trick like shock absorption can stop me? A real hero can always blast through a tough spot. I just needed a little help finding it. He unleashed a flurry of punches, each one aimed with pinpoint precision not at the Numa's head or chest, but at the weakened, crumbling knee joint that Izuku had created. Plus! The first punch shattered the joint. Ultra! The second sent the Numa staggering back, its leg bending at an unnatural angle. All Might followed, his fists a blur, each blow more powerful than the last. He wasn't just punching anymore. He was overwhelming the system. He wound back for one final, cataclysmic blow. Now for a lesson! You may have heard these words before, but I'll teach you what they really mean. Go beyond! He threw a punch infused with every ounce of power he had left. A punch that carried the weight of a nation's hope. Plus! Ultra! The blow connected with the Numa's chest, but the shockwave was focused, channeled through its compromised body. Its shock absorption and regeneration overloaded at the same instant. With a final, gurgling scream, the Numa was launched like a cannonball, blasting through the dome of the USJ and disappearing into the sky. Silence. The villains stared, slack-jawed. The students looked on in awe. Izuku was on his knees, panting, the resonant gauntlets dissolving from his hands. He had used a significant amount of power, but he was still operational. He looked up at All Might, who stood wreathed in steam, his fist outstretched, a triumphant yet weary god. Shigaraki was trembling, not with fear, but with rage. He was scratching his neck frantically, drawing blood. He cheated. He cheated. He cheated. The final boss isn't supposed to get weaker. Just as he was about to lunge at the exhausted All Might, the crack of a gunshot echoed through the facility. Bullets tore through Shigaraki's arm and leg. The pro-heroes had arrived. Snipe, President Mike, Cementos, and Principal Nizu himself. The League of Villains was finished. Kurogyri enveloped the injured Shigaraki, and with a final, hateful glare at Izuku and All Might, they vanished. The crisis was over. As medics tended to the wounded and police secured the remaining thugs, Izuku sat wrapped in a shock blanket, watching All Might give his statement. He had done it. He hadn't won the fight, but he had provided the key. He had been the unforeseen variable, the one piece of data the villains hadn't accounted for. Nizu waddled over to him, his beady black eyes gleaming with an unnerving level of intelligence. Midoriya, the principal said, his voice cheerful. A truly remarkable display of tactical analysis and support. You identified a weakness in an opponent that was overwhelming even All Might, and created an opportunity for victory. Most students would have charged in blindly or run in fear. He paused, tilting his head. That technology of yours is truly fascinating. It seems to function on a level of analysis that rivals even my own quirk. Tell me, what else can it do? The question was casual, but the weight behind it was immense. Izuku looked at the principal, at the creature whose intellect was said to be superhuman. He knew in that moment that he was being analyzed, catalogued, and assessed. He was no longer just a student in Nizu's eyes. He was a strategic asset, a powerful, unknown, and potentially invaluable piece on the grand chessboard of the hero world. And he had just shown the villains, the heroes, and the world that he was a piece that could change the entire game.